Hello and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. And on today's show, one of Paste Magazine's most anticipated mystery and thriller books of 2023, Lexie Elliott's Bright and Deadly Things, dropping this month, right in time for Valentine's Day. After all, what says I love you better than a psychological thriller? Please welcome Lexie Elliott. But you feel good?
I feel good.
You look lovely.
Oh, thank you. I can see you've got it now. Is that a cup of coffee there for you?
Now, this is actually tea.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm a chain tea drinker.
Well, I'll tell you what, since we're on the topic, I have been a hardcore coffee drinker my whole life. Black, as strong as I can get it. My wife, because of some allergies or something, had to back off of coffee. So she started drinking tea. And Lexie, she didn't just drink any kind of tea. She had every kind of tea imaginable to mankind, right? So she's tea clubs, fancy tea, unfancy tea, black tea, green tea. And I kept saying one day, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, fine, whatever. So one day I tried this really fancy micro encapsulated, freeze-dried, organic,
expensive
tea. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really good. And then I found out the price and I'm like, you know what? I'm okay. I'll stick with coffee. I'm going to make this very short. So then she went to, and they just came in yesterday, something Tips. It's a British
PG Tips.
That's it.
That's what I drink. Builder's tea, PG Tips.
And this is exquisite. Now, what's funny is that I never drank cream or sugar in my coffee, but for some reason, we've been watching The Queen and all this different stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
what if I put cream and then I tried it? I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. Now I get it. Yeah, I've been drinking it. I've been drinking it like I'm hardcore now. I'm 2 weeks in. And I'm just like.
But you can just, you can finish a cup and go straight for another one and you won't be jittery the way you are with the coffee. So it's what I do. At least, I reckon, 14 cups a day.
Wow. Okay. And you know what? Here's another thing, since I want to stay on this because this is really fascinating to me. When you go to a restaurant and you have a cup of coffee and you pour a cup of coffee and they come back and warm it up, if you doctor it at all, it's never quite the same. Whereas tea is always tea.
Yeah. And the other thing with tea that I do that I'm sure lots of people don't, if I have accidentally let the cup go cold, I will warm it up in the microwave. And I wouldn't do that with coffee.
You can't do it with coffee.
Yeah.
It cooks it or something. It doesn't taste as good. Yeah. This tea moment is sponsored by PG Tips.
Definitely should be.
Well, Lexie Elliott, it is so lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us on The Thriller Zone.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to Megan Beatty for hooking us up because she's been working it. So,
yeah, she's wonderful. A good find.
So lovely. Your book. Okay, we're going to be talking about this, and I make notes, and I'm one of those people that my mother would turn over in her grave. Are you marking in that book? Are you folding corners? Yes, Mom, it's homework. Okay, that's part of the deal. But this Bright and Deadly Things is a lovely read, lovely and horrific all at the same time, and it drops this month to Lush reviews. In fact, Lexie, I was following Hank Philippi Ryan, and she was heaping some glowing praise on you, girlfriend.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, that was lovely of her as well. Very touched, very pleased.
She's a hell of a writer too, I might add.
Yeah. Quite someone to say nice things about you, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you find a pro like her, everybody knows Hank. When you find a pro like her and she goes on and on about it, and then she tweets it and Instagrams it, you know well, I've got to check this girl out, lady, woman, friend. So anyway, I enjoyed the book. She enjoyed the book. Our listeners are going to rip through it. So we're going to dive into it. But I want to start, if you don't mind, I want to start a little bit backstep because I like to get to know whom I'm talking to because you have quite a fascinating background. I find it very interesting. And we've heard this our whole writing life, that you write what you know. And it's so cool to meet an author who literally writes what she knows. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not talking about How to Kill Your Best Friend, which was one of your early books.
Yeah, let's just be clear. I don't write everything that I know. Some of it is, artistic license and imagination.
So between us girls, you haven't actually killed your best friend, have you?
She's still alive.
Okay.
And in fact, she's in the dedications for that book. So yeah, there is a reassurance in that dedication that I've never considered killing her.
Good. So one of your I could not help but ask you this, and if you've answered it 100 times, please bear with me because I'm the first time your audience. But you studied physics at Oxford and eventually earned a doctorate in theoretical physics. Now, both of those things are amazing, and they both figure into your book. And I guess I want to start, if you don't mind, for my audience and me, because I'm one of those guys. I'm reading constantly, fiction, nonfiction. I'm just always wanting to learn. And so, what is, for those of us who don't know exactly what theoretical physics is, can you give me an idea in a layman's terms what that is?
Sure. I mean, put simply, it's physics where you aren't doing experiments. It tends to be more mathematical. It might require quite a bit of computing work as well, but you're not in a lab doing experiments. And I discovered whilst I was doing my undergraduate physics degree that I hated the lab with a passion, that it brought on a stonking headache within about 20 minutes of being inside it. And I just gravitated more towards the mathematical end of physics that didn't require you to be in the lab at all.
That's interesting. So you literally got a headache?
Oh, I think it must have been a tension headache from just absolutely hating being there. I had a wonderful lab partner who would drag me out halfway through the day, and we'd go and have a lovely lunch and then go back into it again and finish it off. And honestly, I wouldn't have survived without John, but I got through what I had to do to get my degree in terms of labs. And you could take theoretical courses in lieu of the labs. So I took as many theoretical courses as I could to avoid the labs. And that set me down that path towards theoretical physics rather than experimental.
Oh, okay. Fascinating. I share something with you in that when I was in school, if you engaged me in a discourse, like we had just bounce back and forth off the top of my head, I could do that all day long, talk all day long, pull it out of my cap. But if you sat me down to a piece of paper and I had to scribble in that little ABCD and you had to darken a little circle, and you had multiple choice, something happened to me. I turned into a tension ball. I got a headache. I would sweat. It was the fact of like, oh my God, it's only 4 choices. What if I make it wrong? I think that one's this. And especially when they'd go, is it A, B, C, or is D could be A and B, but not C? That one of those. And you're just like,
yeah.
That just, kids, there's no reason to go to school. I'm kidding.
Yeah, that kind of definitive nature of one of these is going to be right and the rest is all wrong. And yeah, whereas when you're talking, you feel like you can muddle through a little more, right?
Right. Which is why when I defended in my master's, they said, well, you're going to have to sit before a board and, explain everything. I'm like, got it. No problemo. Because what's that old saying? If you can't wow them with science, bury them in bullshit or something like that. Anyway, so let's talk about this. Your protagonist, Dr. Emily Rivers, is suffering the loss of her husband and is attending a retreat, much like you did. And this is another thing about writing what you know during your academic years, right? So you take it from there. Share how your life helped set up and set the stage for Dr. Rivers, and how those parallel universes, because that was about what, two decades ago, roughly?
Yeah, a little more. It was the year 2000. I got invited to go to Chalet des Anglais, which is in the French Alps, and it's owned by three Oxford colleges in a trust, and each of them takes a reading party every summer. And it's quite a unique thing. You know, it's invitation only. It's a mix of people who are at different stages of their academic career, from undergrad through to very senior professors, 10 or 15 or so, and you spend a week there and you do a lot of walking, and you're supposed to be doing something academic, doing some reading as well. I mean, I think at the time my reading was probably light, my walking was good, and my drinking was quite good, really, because there was nice red wine. So I had a lovely time, and clearly nobody died. But it was such a unique setting. No running water, no electricity, everybody kind of mucking in all together, despite the different, I hesitate to say social strata, but there's definitely different levels within academia. And it stuck in my head. And when I thought about writing a Oxford based kind of campus thriller, I sort of wanted to do something a little different, a little more fresh. And I also liked the idea that if I could get them off campus, then and put them somewhere where it was hard to escape, it becomes more into that closed environment thriller, which I really like, because you can ratchet up the tension and make it very claustrophobic, very atmospheric, quite easily with that. So that's where it all came from.
You took the word right out of my mouth, claustrophobic. That's the way that you kind of feel when you're in this. And my wife suffers from that in elevators, does not like elevators or closed spaces where, you don't know if you can get out quickly. And that was a nice element, that one of those atmospheric elements that really helps paint the picture. Did you suffer any of that? I'm just curious, as backstory. Did you feel like that particular trait of being forced in an enclosed space, or not freely moving about with strangers, was real key to this
I
story?
didn't. Yeah, I mean, I didn't either at the chalet or otherwise. But my eldest son, until maybe 8 or 9, definitely did not like an elevator and would climb 10 flights of stairs and force me to climb 10 flights of stairs to avoid them. And he's grown out of that. I wonder if it still niggles at the back of his brain, and he just gets past it now. I'm not sure. But there were definite instances where you could see that it was primal for him. You couldn't reason him out of it. It was absolutely a primal fear for him.
I read somewhere, and maybe it was with Hank's article, about how you choose names, and I love that. I'm a big fanatic of really good names. I feel like the name that you bring to a character, first of all, it has to have a reason. You're not just going to go, "Hey, let's call him Bob Smith," right? But there's got
Yeah.
to be something really specific about it. And those names, do you do this? Like, once you pick that name, first of all, do you spend a lot of time in that arena? And then do you go, yeah, this is it, and it's not changing, and here's why?
Yeah, exactly. I do spend a lot of time getting it right, and you sort of have that, oh, got it, when it comes together. Yes, that is the right name, and you can get close sometimes and just be going, no, 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 it's not quite there, and then you get it, and you're like, yes, this is right, and it wouldn't change for me. I've had a name change on a minor character before, when I realized that it just, to say it didn't look so similar, but to read it looked very similar to another name. Just the way the letters sat together. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly guilty on occasion of getting to the end of a novel that I'm reading and not actually being able to say out loud the names of some of the characters, because I've just followed the shape of them through the book. So I have occasionally, well, certainly one instance I can think I've changed a minor character's name, but a major character's name wouldn't change.
Awesome. With those, going back to your similarities and writing, writing what you know, and borrowing your life as you instill it in the page. I love this. Again, folks, by the way, Lexie is quite the athlete. And if you wonder about that, I do wonder if your next thriller may be about someone who swims the English Channel, because, folks, she has she did swim the English Channel. And so I was curious. I don't know that I've ever sat down and watched that event before. So I did a little bit of Googling, and I found out that it's 21 miles, give or take. It's about 62 degrees Fahrenheit. And what is it? Is it Shakespeare's Cliff in England? It starts and it goes through Strait of Dover and it ends in a place called, let me see if I get this right. Hold on. France, Cap Greenay.
Well done.
All right. So all of that notwithstanding, some of my listeners are going to go, who wants to do that? Why do that? Well, if you're an athlete like you are, because you've been swimming since school, what is that like? I'm going to pull it back to the story, but I want to find out what that is like. What does it take to get to that point? Let's start there.
Okay, so English Channel specifically. When I was at Oxford, they started up a race against Cambridge across the English Channel. It goes every 2 years. There's 6 people in each team, 3 guys, 3 girls, and you basically alternate until you hit France, each person swimming for an hour. And I was part of the team in the year 2000. 2000 was a busy year for me. Think about it. I went to Chalet des Anglais as well. Anyway, I was part of the team in the year 2000. And I remember at the time just saying, well, that was a great experience, but I'm never going to do it solo because it's just too far and too cold. But then later on, I remember meeting someone who wasn't a swimmer with a similar pedigree to myself, maybe, a little bit slower, but had crossed the English Channel and had just, doggedly got on with it and done it. And that really struck me. It was like, actually, maybe I could. And then I think when I had my eldest child, I was looking for a challenge to feel a little bit more like me. Because, I think it was Nigella Lawson who said, once you have a child, you stop being the picture and you become the frame. And that's fine. I don't mind being the frame at all, but sometimes I want to feel like me in the frame. So I thought that would be a good challenge to put myself down for, somewhat naively. So I did do a crossing the year after Cameron was born, which had all sorts of challenges with, handling a baby and all the training and so on and so forth. But I think it becomes, nobody would swim the channel because, let's do this for fun, right? It's a really long way. It's really cold. The training is actually, and this is coming from someone who really likes endurance training, the training is really boring. You get in the harbor at Dover, for example, and swim for 6 hours, and you come in every hour or so and someone gives you a hot cup of something really dull, and then you go and get going again, and you count down to the next time someone's going to give you a hot cup of something, and it's really dull. And that kind of training, you wouldn't do it if you didn't have to. And so there must be some element of psychological compulsion. I think I've ticked the box. Don't need to do it again.
All right. So now I live in Encinitas, San Diego area. So
okay, lovely.
Yes, it's quite lovely. The difference then of the West Coast beaches than East Coast is the water here is very cold, almost year round, except the dead of summer. The beaches are a little bit more rock than sand. And there are things called sharks, which you don't have to deal with every day. They're not always there, but they do like to come out around feeding time, which is early morning, which oddly enough is when surfers like to surf. Yeah. And then around cocktail hour, which is where surfers like to surf. So I guess I thought to myself, what would be your biggest fear? Would it be exhaustion? Would it be sharks? Then I found out there are not a whole lot of sharks in that part of the water.
Not that part, no.
Jellyfish, which is another big thing.
There's certainly lots of jellyfish, and I got stung a lot in training. I got stung while I was crossing the channel, but the jellyfish in that area are really quite, they'll leave a mark maybe, and you'll feel like something has electrocuted you whilst it's stinging you, but it passes really quickly. Whereas there's some in the Mediterranean which are brutal, and you really come up in welts and be quite disturbed by. But the ones in the Channel are sort of fine. I think really the thing I was afraid of was the thing that happens to a lot of people, which is you get within maybe a mile of France, and that's the point at which you fail. It's called the graveyard of champions, because the shape of the seabed and the currents and everything make it actually very difficult to get through that last mile, and by which point you're completely exhausted anyway. And I think the statistic is something like 50% don't get across, and most of them are failing in that last section. So I was really worried that I was going to put in all this effort and then, fall at what feels like the final hurdle. Thankfully, I got across. So, but I did end up in hospital afterwards, but that's a completely different story.
It wasn't serious, I hope.
Well, I had pulmonary edema from getting water in my lungs from the swimming. But I was only in for a night. Pulmonary edema. So swelling on your lungs, water on your lungs. But I went into hospital, and they put me on an oxygen mask, and they shoved antibiotics into me and saline solution, and all these sort of things that they do to rehydrate you. And it was probably the best recovery from swimming the Channel that anyone's ever had.
Well, just the fact that you can say you did it, check the box. That's I gotta believe, reading your background, all the swimming and running and marathons and triathlons. I mean, I'm a former long distance runner, not triathlons, but I know what it takes. And when you were talking about that last mile, I remember those days when you're that it's 26.2.
Yeah.
And you know that at
that
about
0.2.
Yeah, 0.2, whoever came up with that. Really, by then you're like, but somewhere around 20, I want to remember when it usually really hurts bad.
The wall, 2021. Yeah.
When you hit that wall, you're think, oh, geez, no, I have 5 to go, 6 to go. And you have to just figure out, okay, I've got to reach down deep where it didn't exist yesterday and pull it out. Otherwise, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit. No. Now, if you snap something, pull something, that's a little bit different. But so kudos to you. Bravo.
Thank you very much. And there was some swimming in How to Kill Your Best Friend. So, an element of open water swimming in that novel. I suppose I do draw on my own experiences.
Okay, so I was caught. I have not read that book. I'm sorry I haven't read all your books.
Look, I'm very, very touched that you've read Bright and Deadly Things.
Speaking of which, I like the contradiction of bright and deadly. So you usually think dark and deadly. And I know you're a fanatic for choosing names, titles, and characters' names. So do you remember where this came up with? Was it one of those epiphanies when you went, boom, there it is, and it just never changes?
That one did. It was my working title, and it stuck. So How to Kill Your Best Friend was the first time I got my working title, and it stuck for the novel. But I remember when I came up with that, which I pretty much came up with before the novel, I thought, I don't think anyone's going to take that one off me. They're gonna stick with that. And Bright and Deadly Things, I like leaving space for the reader in general. It's something I like. I don't want to spoon feed too much. I like ambiguity, and the thing with Bright and Deadly Things is, bright how? Are we talking intellectually? Are we talking socially? Bright how? And what are these things that are apparently deadly as well? It's nicely ambiguous.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in the world is double entendres. Love that. When you say one thing, and then you go, wait, that could also be this. Yeah, love that. I knew reading about you that anybody who can go through the background that you had, and then you suffered, you got booted after the global financial crisis. Anybody who can work in investment banking and then swim the English Channel and run these marathons has a built-in tenacity that your average bear doesn't have. So I knew that, okay, here's someone who is going to approach thriller writing in general fiction, and go, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? They say no, I'll go again, right? I mean, is that pretty safe to assume?
Yeah, I think you know, I started writing a novel right after I got sacked during the global financial crisis, when so many people in that industry did. And I had a bit of time in my hands and two young kids, and I thought, right, let's actually give this a crack. And I'd had a bit of success with short stories, and it gave me the confidence to give it a go. And I got to the point where I just thought, you know what? I believe that if I dig in and keep going for long enough, it's going to come to something. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm getting enough out of the process that it's worth doing anyway. And I still feel that way now. Even if I didn't have a publishing contract, even if nobody was going to read my work, I would still write. So it's important enough to me that I would do it anyway.
Well, that tells me even more about you, because, you hear people, who did I have on recently? Brad Taylor said, if he had known, I'm not going to quote this exactly, but if he had known that the writing business was as tough as it was, he got a really magnificent break right out of the gate, shot right to New York Times bestseller. But if he had known it was going to be that hard, he would have stayed at Fort Bragg. He would have just said, no, I'll just write it as a hobby, maybe every once in a while. So when I hear you say that, that tells me, again, more about you, in that you are doing it for the passion. And that's where I think that writers who set out, when they see these 6 and 7 figure deals popping up, and they think, oh yeah, I want to do that. I mean, all I've got to do is write a book. Yeah, I'm like, it's, first of all, it's not that easy. Secondly, it's highly competitive. And third, you better love it front to back. You're in the wrong biz, right?
Yeah, and you better be producing something that you're happy with. My agent once said, "Look, life is too short to write books you don't want to write," and I firmly believe that. And if somebody said, "Well, if you could just write according to this A, B, C, D, E, then you will automatically be, Times #1 bestseller every time," that isn't why I write.
Yeah.
That I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, I'm going to go back to one of my abso-favo moments of the book, and you're wondering, David, where's the yellow tab? Right? You're thinking, where's that
I
yellow tab?
am.
Okay. Well, guess what? It starts at the very beginning. Here's the opening line, folks. Chapter 1. Are you paying attention? Listen closely. There's someone in the house. Okay. If you don't, you got me right there. You got me right there. Now I'm like, okay, I'm in for the ride. What do you got? And then you start describing the room, and, part of the conversation's in the head and outside the head. And I won't say whether anyone was or not, but you'll have to just read the book. But tell me about, like, again, we're going to circle back to picking that character's name, sticking with it, picking that title, sticking with it, picking that opening line, and how essential it is. How did that come about?
So for me, I'm usually pretty firm on my opening scene, right down to opening sentence. And I'm fairly firm on my ending scene. And it's the in between, which is a bit more fuzzy and might wind its way and meander a little. So that was absolutely what I envisaged for Emily, who's clearly not in a great space. Her husband has died, and she's trying desperately to figure out how to actually get herself out of the kind of rut she's been in. She's been unable to get out of this abyss of grief, and she's looking to do that. And we start from there, where she's forced to deal with somebody in the house. And that, to me, was okay. Let's just throw it at her straight away. There's something she's going to have to deal with straight away in the novel.
Well, in talking about opening with a fear that, I mean, I'm a guy. I'm not afraid to say that if I came upon my house and I thought someone's in it, it would freak me the hell out. And so when you start with that visceral fear that everyone has, and that fight or flight intensity is raging through your body, we all feel that instantly, and it's like it unleashes your imagination like a tiger in a cage. And you know that if the writer can grab you there and then hold you through that first chapter and then create that suspense, that thing that just keeps you going, you're along for the ride. And Bright and Deadly Things does that. I just might want to add right here.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
I do want to say, as we kind of start our way toward wrapping up, what do you do these days? Because look, I want to know what you do to stay in shape. Writing, everyone thinks, oh, writing, you sit down in a chair and you just either type or you scribble. I mean, it's not that tough, but I have learned through the years, thanks to chiropractic and otherwise,
Yeah.
that if you're not working out to keep your shoulders back and stretching and cardio and doing a little bit of this exercises for your wrist and so forth, I mean, at the absolute bare minimum, that you're going to end up hunched over and, looking like a droopy old man. So what do you still keep all this same kind of activity on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been really, really into exercise. I guess I've made myself addicted to it in some sense. And at the moment, I am training for the London Marathon, which is in April. So I'm running about 30 miles a week. I swim 3 times a week. I lift weights twice a week. So I'm doing a lot at the moment because of the London Marathon going into the mix. But yeah, it's really important to me to do all of that, and I prefer to do it first thing in the morning, actually. And I feel like a better human being when I've ticked that box. And sometimes I'll then go and run again in the evening or something as a kind of delineation between, okay, my work is done and now we're moving into the evening. Um, but we're a family that does a lot of sport, and my husband certainly. There are times where I'm like, do you want to maybe go for a run and then we'll have that conversation? Because he can definitely be a bear with a sore head without some exercise.
It makes me think of two pieces of advice I've heard through the years, and they're both cliches, but they're 100% work. One is resting is rusting. I just heard that one not that long ago, but my favorite is a body in motion stays in motion.
I have another one, which is motion is lotion.
Nice. Cartilage, body, joint fluids and so forth. Yeah, I think it's absolutely key. I think not only are you talking about longevity, and I'm working on a nonfiction book that has to do with longevity, and I've got several decades on you, believe it or not, and I realize how much harder each year. Matter of fact, my birthday is Wednesday.
Oh, happy birthday when it comes.
Thank you, Davi. But I realized that every single year gets just a little bit tougher. And it's not tougher like, oh my God, it's just, that doesn't bounce back quite like it used to. Or,
Yeah.
I've got work a little bit harder to get that stretch without hurting. And I'm just a big proponent of it. If it's too much down a rabbit hole, forgive me, but I think it's important.
No, I agree. And I think you're right. As you get older, the recovery isn't quite the same. Like the last marathon I did was 2019, and I'm definitely feeling a bit more like my body is taking longer to get used to the miles than I thought it would. But, that's okay. So I'm not going to run a PB. That's fine. I just want to run the marathon again.
Exactly. PB personal best. By the way,
Exactly.
my favorite thing, and again, my wife turns me on to tea, and my wife turns me on to yoga. And when I went to my Lexie, the first yoga class I went to, I was the biggest dork ever. Oh my God. I'm doing these poses and I'm like, first of all, what the hell is this called? Where did you come up with that name? How do you expect me to get my knee over there? Cutting the story short, within just a matter of weeks, the ability to just stretch muscles slightly past your what you think is your ordinary capacity and hold it for a few seconds, the what it does and releases endorphins in your body and just the mobility and circulation so that your brain is energized to write more words is fascinating.
Yeah, I for me the cardio works best for that kind of getting the words flowing, because I feel like it sort of scrubs your brain clean
Yeah.
and gets rid of stuff and then gives space for other ideas to come
Yeah.
in. And especially if you're running outside and then you've got the impact of nature and everything. I can't get behind yoga. I've tried and it just isn't working for me, I'm afraid.
All right, I'm going to throw this out, and then we're going to bounce because we got things to do. I'm going to say this, and this is funny because my wife's got me dialed in for one this Saturday. I say, honey, get me the slowest, lowest, easiest form of yoga there is. Don't expect the when the gal up front yells downward dog or yamasutsi fatsi watsi, whatever the hell it is. Don't expect me to sit there and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what that pose is. No, just get me down and stretch, because just the stretching and mobility is the key. So I'm going to throw that out at you. Find the lowest, slowest, and give it a shot.
Okay,
All
I'll
right.
take that on board.
There you go. As we wrap up, I always like to ask Lexie, I like to ask all my authors, what's their best piece of advice? Now, it's specific to writing advice. It can be a favorite piece of advice that maybe you heard from someone, you picked up, you held on to it for a while, you've adapted for yourself, or you go, no, this is it. What I've learned in my 4 or 5 books now, and from the very beginning, this would be that thing.
So I already mentioned that piece of advice that my agent said, which is, life's too short to write books you don't want to write.
Yep.
And that is absolutely what I cling on to. But then also, I think what I've learned through this process, because, you come to it and you've written a book and then suddenly you have a contract. Well, not suddenly, it takes an awfully long time. And you know nothing, if you're like me, about the publishing process, and you learn. And so it's all been a learning process to me. But I have a real appreciation now for the second draft. I suppose I used to think that all your creativity was in the first draft, and then it was a little dry after that. But I think the second draft is where you can really nail it and really, think really hard about how you want to draw out the themes, and where you have one sentence you need to put in to change the emphasis and what that sentence needs to be and exactly where it needs to go. There's a real creativity in that as well. So
Yeah.
the second draft is like my thing now.
Now, let me ask you this. So I love that. I could not agree more. And the crafting sentences and finding, oh, that sentence is pretty good, but I think I can do better. Let me go take a walk or a run and come back because I think I can take it one step better. People often, I think, my personal opinion is, it's a little bit like painting a watercolor or a painting. You have to really give that some time and maturity and evolution to get there. But I think. So my question is it your second draft that you're like, okay, now it's there? And then at that second, do you hand it off to beta readers or secondary readers or your husband or your agent or whomever? Or do you go, okay, the second now is really locked in, but I'm going to go one and then one more and then hand it off?
Okay. For a start, my husband is a lawyer and reads for a living, so there's no chance he's reading my stuff. I mean, he reads them when they come out, but not on an ongoing basis. And in fact, I use my agent Marcy as like my first reader. So it's my agent and my publishing editor. Really, it doesn't go to anyone else. But I would deliver a very clean first draft, and then I would take the feedback. And sometimes the feedback is, people often feel compelled to give you feedback with a solution, but actually even just the mention of a specific area is telling you there's a problem there. Doesn't the solution that they suggest may not suit me at all, but I take on board that there is something to be addressed there, and can look at it. And that second draft, I would say, ends up being very, very, very close to what ultimately gets published.
Have you met folks who have gone 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? And A, and second part of that question, B, do you often ask them why so many, or is it merely, and here's why I'm getting at that. A lot of people go, they're afraid to let it go. They're, what if I'll just do one more edit on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder if that's a bit like painters who, they don't know when to stop. And in fact, put down your brush, you're going to start spoiling it,
Right.
But I have met people who are like that. And I just think their process maybe works differently, that maybe their first draft isn't quite as clean as mine. I don't know about that. But I've also heard about writers who say, "Oh, I never do a second draft." I think Arundhati Roy is famous for saying that. And on God of Small Things, that's an amazing book. I might quibble on our second book that I've forgotten the name of and say, you could have done a second draft. So I don't know. You hear this from certain people, and when you hear it, sometimes you think, I'm not sure I believe it, and sometimes you think, yeah, I do believe it, and you should go back. But I think most of us are in kind of 2 to 3 drafts, don't you think? Where do you stand?
I am the second. I'm either the second or the third, and I'm closer to the third, because here's what I do is I bang out one, and I write as fast as I can, and I try not to overthink it too much. Now, on each day, I'll go the next day I'll go back the day before, see what I read, and then kind of gives me the momentum, right?
Yeah.
So that's done, and then I make a fresh new. That didn't work, and that timeline didn't fit, and that hook didn't really hook me, and that tee-up didn't get delivered till way too late. But by the third one, it is the charm, and I feel like, okay, now this is it. This is as close as I can get it, and then it's a handoff. And I didn't do the handoffs on my early ones at all. I'm like, first of all, I don't want your opinion. I don't need your opinion, and I don't mean that egotistically. It's like you're going to come at it from a place of like one of two places. Oh, I'm the expert on this, or I've got to give David something, right? Or, I didn't really like it, but okay, Jesus, my friend, so I got to think of something I like, right? It's this overcompensation of some form or fashion. I like the fact that you only handed off to 2 people. I kind of dig that.
Well, and I'm the same as you, that I worry that if I got given work from a friend, that I would really struggle on how to give feedback, whether it was great or bad or whatever. And so I suppose I don't want to put somebody else in that position. And we're all busy, right? Who has time to be a beta reader for someone else?
No, exactly. And, to ask my wife, who's very close to me and knows how I tick, if I hand it to her, she's going to go, I know that she's got a little bit of this. I don't want to hurt his feeling because this right here really sucks. But now we've been together long enough. She goes, this right here, she's learned this phrase. It doesn't really take the story forward.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Well, where did you get that, little Miss Writing 101? But it's true. You go back and you read it. Oh, that doesn't really push it forward. Oh, I don't really need it.
Doesn't service the plot.
Doesn't service the plot. Yeah. Oh, anyway, listen, I have a feeling I could talk to you all day long. We're in a time crunch. This has been so lovely. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful, and I'm happy to talk anytime.
And folks, I want to remind you real quick, learn more, LexieElliott.com. The book, once again, Bright and Deadly Things. It's one of those must reads. And look, I could sit here and read off all the accolades on the back. There's plenty of them. A lot of people, just like me, dig it. So add it to your list. Lexie, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.